We have mentioned before that different materials have different elasticity and friction. In the game, we use physical materials to achieve this. Previously, we added physical materials to the basketball and the ground. In the same way, we can also add physical materials to the net according to actual needs. Find the newly created physical material in the project window. Copy it and get a copy named net. Click it and change its elastic coefficient to 0 in the inspector window on the right. Change the dynamic friction to 0.1 and the static friction to 0.2. Change friction combine to multiply. Change the bounce combine property to multiply as well. As for what this setting means, you can get the corresponding information by querying the API. First, search for Physic material to find relevant information. Further, search for Physic material combine to get relevant information. Average means taking the average of the two physical material properties. For example, if the friction coefficient of one object is 0.5 and the friction coefficient of another object is 0.3, when the two objects collide, their friction coefficient will be calculated as 0.5 plus 0.3 divided by 2, which equals 0.4. Multiply means multiplying two physical material properties. For example, if the friction coefficient of one object is 0.5 and the friction coefficient of another object is 0.3, when the two objects collide, their friction coefficient will be calculated as 0.5 times 0.3, which equals 0.15. Minimum means taking the minimum value of the two physical material properties. For example, if the friction coefficient of one object is 0.5 and the friction coefficient of another object is 0.3, when the two objects collide, their friction coefficient will be calculated as 0.3. Maximum means taking the maximum value of the two physical material properties. For example, if the friction coefficient of one object is 0.5 and the friction coefficient of another object is 0.3, when the two objects collide, their friction coefficient will be calculated as 0.5. Find the net part in the basketball stand node. Or directly select the net part in the scene window. Drag the newly created physical material to the mesh collider component of the net node. Click the basketball physical material, change its friction combine to average, and change its bounce combine to multiply. Run and test. It is found that the basketball cannot fall down after falling into the basket. The reason is that the net is set a little small. Let's make appropriate adjustments to the size of the net first. First, adjust its height to the appropriate size. It is found that setting the Y direction scaling value to 0.6 is more appropriate. Then, adjust the size of the net. select the net node. In the inspector window on the right, click the chain icon. On the input box, hold down the left mouse button, drag left and right, and adjust the scaling value in each direction synchronously. After testing, it is found that the scaling value of the net is set to 0.68, which is more appropriate, and the basketball can just fall through the net. Of course, it is no problem to increase it a little bit, and you can adjust it according to the actual situation. At this time, don't forget that the net has become larger, and the basket must also be appropriately larger. Click the icon in the lower left corner of the scene window to switch to the top view. Adjust the scale value of the basket. After testing, it is found that the scale value of the basket is set to 0.34, which is more appropriate. The scale value in the Y direction can be adjusted to 0.23. Adjust the position of the basket so that the relative position of the basket to the backboard looks reasonable. Adjust the position of the net so that the position of the net and the basket is reasonable. Switch different perspectives to see the effect after adjustment. After testing, it is found that the basketball can fall from the net normally. Earlier, we said that the green column under the basketball stand is wrapped with anti-collision sponge. Here, you can also achieve the corresponding effect by adding physical materials to it. Copy one of the physical materials to get a new physical material and name it upright. Set its dynamic friction to 0.6 and static friction to 0.8. Set its bounciness to 0.2. Set its friction combined to maximum. Set its bounce combined to multiply. Then, apply this physical material to the green column of the basketball stand just now. Remember to make a prefab of the basketball stand again for use elsewhere. Delete the existing basketball stand prefab in the prefabs folder. Drag the basketball stand you just made into the prefab to generate a new basketball stand prefab. Unlock the previous node. Delete another basketball stand. Drag the basketball prefab to the left hierarchy window to generate another basketball stand. Right-click and unlock the generated node. Change its Z value to 10. Press the F key. It is found that it needs to be rotated 180 degrees around the Y-axis. Ctrl+S to save. At this time, everyone finds that our progress bar is not yet associated with shooting. Review the previous content and think about how to improve the logic of shooting.